Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Riverfront. This is the world's most dangerous podcast where we discuss the Cincinnati Reds, and today in particular, George Kenneth Griffey Jr. I am Tim Daniel. Joining me this week is Seth Shaner. And Seth, we really have nothing to talk about besides like this like anniversary of the Griffey trade, and otherwise it's just kind of it was truck day this week. Pitchers and catchers reporting on Monday. A lot of them are already in Goodyear. There's already clips out there of Elly swinging the bat, so it's coming. It's almost here.
Yeah, last week when Nick Kroll kind of said, "Hey, this is your team," my team is on the floor. To quote Norman Dale, you kind of held out hope that behind the scenes something else was going to happen, and there's a good chance they may still bring in a guy partway through spring training, or if somebody gets let go at the end of spring training.
Yeah,
certainly they'll do that, but you kind of hoped, and for me last night, hearing that Pete Alonso went back to the Mets, that kind of slammed the door shut for me as the Bengals announcing team. That was the coffin nails, as they would say, as Dan Hort would say. So it is what it is. It's an improved Reds roster. I think you and I both have touched on that, and we will see what the Terry Franconca effect has and where it goes from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to touch on this because we kind of touched on it for a second on Late Night Reds on Sunday. Friendly reminder that we know Late Night Reds this Sunday due to it being the Super Bowl. But I wanted to touch on the conversation of over-unders have come out for Major League Baseball. And Fangraphs has done their prediction tools for Petcoa and everything like that. And people don't seem to like the Reds. And there's things about that I understand. But there's a lot there that I don't understand. So, whatever. It's a prediction tool. Don't look too far into it. But the over-under right now is 70.5 wins. They won 77 last year with a worse roster and a worse manager. So I feel okay saying that I think this is an easy over. And then this whole like non-combatant for the playoffs are going to finish in last place according to Fangraphs thing. Maybe you can definitely say the Cubs are better. You can maybe have an argument for the Brewers. But like, I don't look at these teams side by side with Pittsburgh and think the Pirates are better than the Reds by any means. That's not even counting my Pittsburgh hatred. That's just legit.
Yeah.
Side by side, I think the Reds are a better team.
Well, the Pirates did far less than the Reds did. So
yeah.
There's that. But there's also the fact that I don't think the computers crunch the numbers with the manager in mind, right? So we believe that, whether it's right away for playoffs this year or not, they're still going to take a step forward with Terry Francona as the manager.
Yeah.
And then the computers don't really know, and maybe this is, as Chad would say, hope is not a strategy, but and we'll get into this with something Terry Francona said this week in a little bit, but Matt McLain, to me, again, a computer could just look at, hey, he didn't do anything last year because he didn't play the game. I just feel like Matt McLain is the glue. Baseball's different than some sports. You can have all the talent in the world, and Elly De La Cruz does, and Elly De La Cruz, rightfully so, is a superstar in the making, maybe already at that status for the Reds. But for me, I'm not going out too far on a ledge here because a lot of people believe it. Matt McLain, in baseball terms, could be the most important factor of the Reds' success this year. And it's because he does everything well. And I think he's going to do it this year, and knock on wood, he stays healthy. But I am so excited to see Matt McLain play baseball.
Me too.
That I'm willing to say, Baseball Reference War, whatever war you want to go by, Matt McLain to me is going to be a 4-ish guy, if not better. I just feel that way.
I feel the same way. I feel like he's like you said, I feel like he's the glue. I mean, if you look at the 2023 run, he was their best player. I mean, really, for you could say probably the majority of the season. Everyone had different stretches here and there, but he was the most consistent before he got hurt. And I think last year's team probably looks significantly better if he's on the field as well. So yeah, I'm 1,000% with you on that. I'm a full on Matt McLain believer.
And look at 2023 when he was in the lineup, and they did the little things right. It felt like a young team. All these guys were getting their first chance ever for the most part, And yet last year, despite the fact that they did steal a lot of bases and things like that, there was a lot more mistakes. There was a lot more, oh my goodness, this group of guys just isn't playing smart baseball. Why? And blaming David Bell, probably rightfully so, right? In a lot of ways for letting it happen. So to me, though, the common bond or the lack of in 2024, what you had in 2023 was Matt McLain. And I'm just, again, I am head over heels so excited to watch him play this year. And I hope we get to see him for minimum 150 games.
Yeah, I would suspect that that's going to be the case. I guess in a little news, I don't know. I don't think you guys touched on this, you and Garber last week, and I did not touch on this with Ben. We do have the list of non-roster invitees.
Yeah.
And yowza. All right, so pitcher wise, we have Jose Acuna, who obviously set the world on fire in Dominican League this winter. Chase Burns, the number 2 overall pick in last year's draft. Zach Maxwell, Chase Petty, Brian Shaw, Lenny Torres, and Alex Young, who's been with the Reds for a while. Catchers, we have Will Banfield, Michael Troutween, Austin Wins. Infielders, Edwin Arroyo, Cam Collier, Ivan Johnson, Sauer Stewart, and outfielders, Hector Rodriguez. So obviously not too much to look into there. Alex Young maybe has the best case to be on the big league. No, I don't know. Now that they brought in Taylor Rogers, I might be selling myself short there. But I think the thing that excites me the most about that group, Seth, is obviously Hector Rodriguez. But seeing Hector Rodriguez play with the big league guys for a couple weeks, maybe throughout spring, I'm pretty excited to see how he does with them.
Yeah, I think that's, and it'll be good for him, right? Yeah. To get that experience. And you listed some of those infielders as well. Just seeing a Cam Collier who's grown up with a big league dad and kind of knows his way around things, seeing him acclimate to the big leaguers, and even seeing, let's see what Chase Burns looks like compared to Rhett Lauder just a year ago. And I think technically Burns is rated a little higher than Lauder ever was coming in, but he hasn't thrown a professional pitch yet. You would hope actually that the big league starting rotation is so good that maybe you don't need to rush them up or anything like that. And Lauder did a great job. I'm not saying they rushed him, but sometimes you think, well, maybe if you had the equivalent of the 2012 rotation that the Reds had or something like that, where everybody stays healthy and everybody is playing well, and you don't have to force feed a guy in there in a playoff race. So we'll see. I'm interested in seeing those younger guys, and you have to have extra catchers. That's just the way it is. But yeah, Stewart, I want to see what he looks like with the other big league guys and things like that.
Yeah, I was really hoping Duno would get a non-roster invitee just so we can get a couple weeks up with the big league team, but that looks like they don't feel he's there quite yet, as he just finished up his season last year in, I think it was Dayton. Yeah, I think it was with Dayton in the year, if I remember correctly.
Well, and one of the, I've got a good friend up here in Columbus, and one of our favorite things, even going back 25 years ago, would be like, go ahead and go watch Ohio State football play the MAC school so we can see the young guys play.
Yeah.
And that's always been ingrained in me. It's ingrained in me with spring training. I've gone to I haven't been to Arizona for spring training, so it's been a long time since I've been to spring training. But you follow the box scores. You follow, how did this guy do? And obviously Jose Garcia / Barrero, he was one of the last guys that really wowed us and then ended up just not really doing much at the big league level. But it's still fun to watch, hey, in the 5th inning, Cam Collier came in for whomever was Spencer Steer, whomever's playing.
Chamber Candelario,
yeah. So, even reading the Pete Rose book, it was like his first chances was like that. Like they couldn't, once they let him come on the field in that kind of scenario, they couldn't keep him off the field. And it's those types of things that is exciting. That's one of the reasons why they play so many spring training games.
Yeah, I'm getting really, really antsy. I'm getting really excited as the weeks get closer. I don't know. Maybe it's just like, I had a good football year, obviously, in college-wise, and the Bengals obviously did not give me anything I needed. And the Cavs are really good, so it's like this is just kind of feels like it's in line. It just feels like this is a good sports year for me. So I want to keep it going. Yeah.
My son just the other day, he's just so over the Chiefs and the Eagles obviously playing each other, and he's a huge sports kid, and he's like, Dad, I just wish baseball would start. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
I wish he had I wish we were cheering on the Bengals this weekend, obviously, but that aside, and Ohio State basketball is doing okay, but not great. So that aside, it's like, yeah, we need that bridge right now, and pitchers and catchers can't report soon enough.
Yeah, top Series 1 checklist came out for 2025. I'm like, all right, it's that time. So
I went ahead and ordered a pre-order of a mega box. I'm like, I tell myself every year, just go on eBay and find the cards you want instead of spending the money.
Yeah, but there's something about the first pack of the year. There's
There
just something
is,
about
there
it.
is. And I might not build the set like I'd like to, but at the same time, just ripping the packs initially, and then hey, I'd like to get that Elly or this, that, or the other. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. We kind of talked about this a little bit when we had Jake on before we went on our hiatus for the holidays, but I really miss the team sets. The old Oscar Mayer team sets they would do stadium giveaways. Those were the best.
Yeah, they were. And of course, now you get some, they weren't always stadium giveaways, but they do the team sets that you could buy like Target or somewhere like that. And somehow I was going through my Joey Vottos the other day, and I have over 80 different Joey Votto cards. And I was going through them, and I was like, these are all like 2014. It must have been probably my son got them, or maybe they were in lots or something on eBay. But I was like, this isn't even the real Topps card. This is it says, CR-1 or whatever. So it's interesting. You're right. Those team sets, I found my Herm Winningham from one year, and I actually showed Herm when I had him on Red Lake Roundtable. He got a real kick out of that.
Yeah, that was really cool. All right, so let's get to a little bit of current convo because Terry Francona was a guest this week with Jason Stark and Doug Glanville. And obviously, baseball fan or not, Terry Francona is an awesome conversation. So you always can enjoy that. But really, if you're a Reds fan and you're like on the edge of being super excited, this didn't help. This makes you even more excited hearing this conversation he had with those guys. And a lot of great conversations, stories we've heard. Obviously, if you've been kind of keeping up with the media roundtables through the off season, but talking about how he did not necessarily have the game plan of managing. He really enjoyed his year off in Arizona. The only baseball he would flip on, like he would see what games were close in the 8th and 9th inning, and he would flip those games on to kind of watch a little bit. And then talked a little bit about some of the stuff he's going to have going on in camp, particularly just kind of talked about leadership. And one of the big things he says, like, I'm not going to appoint anyone a leader. I'm going to let the players appoint themselves to be that level. Talked about comparing Matt McLain and Dustin Pedroia, and Dustin Pedroia is going to come talk to the big league club, and just talked about Elly and all the things he can do, and compared it to his Cleveland teams and stuff like that. Like it was a really, really awesome conversation.
It was, and the 2 points you make here, it's been brought up separately, but he would even bring up, listen, Jose Ramirez might be a Hall of Fame player at this point. He's putting together that kind of career, but he was young once too, right? And the idea has been put forward that here's Terry Francona. He's going to manage Elly De La Cruz. He managed Jose Ramirez when he was young. And what you want is your best players to be also your leaders. Yeah. And again, I think because McLain and Elly came up together, they can kind of do that together as long as they're on the same team together. But he told that story about one time he wanted Jose. He knew something needed to happen, and he kind of pulled Ramirez aside and said it to him. And this was obviously after he was already a veteran by this point. And he says to him about, hey, we need this to happen. And Ramirez goes, okay. And he just knew it was going to get taken care of. And if you could tell me that 2-3 years from now, Terry Francona could turn to Elly De La Cruz, superstar of all superstars, and us also turn to him as a leader, that would be huge. And we'll see if it happens. I still think Matt McLain will probably be a default to that point, but it could be like, the Greg Vaughn, Barry Larkin dichotomy, where one of them is more lead by example, the other one is more, yelling and screaming a little bit. But
yeah,
if Elly De La Cruz wants to be the best player in baseball, and if Terry Francona can coax out of him what it takes to take the next steps, then Elly could be that guy. Because you talk to any of those guys before, like Pokey Reese or Aaron Boone or all the people who talk about Barry Larkin. How could you not? He's a former MVP in 1999, and how could you not run out and take infield when Barry Larkin's taking infield every day?
Yeah, absolutely.
Vaughn said that they didn't even use fungos. They hit, it was live, live grounders and all that throughout pregame and things like that. It's a big deal. And if Elly and McLain can be joined at the hip in this and really get it done, that's huge. And you mentioned Pedroia, McLain. I mean, I don't know if he is anywhere close to Dustin Pedroia.
We feel pretty good.
I'm already head over heels as a fan of Matt McLain for what he did in May and going forward to 2023. And yet, Dustin Pedroia won the AL MVP.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. And that's up there with Joe Morgan winning back-to-back MVPs. Like, it doesn't happen. Second basemen who are only 5 foot whatever do not win MVPs. And there you go.
He also has. Did you read Francona's book, like about when he left Boston? When
I did.
Boston. Okay, so he has the story in there. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, this is like one of my favorite things ever. So, '07, the Red Sox play the Rockies in the World Series, and they're in Boston for Game 2. Pedroia hits like a tank off Jeff Francis, former Red Jeff Francis, and they go to Colorado for Game 3. And security is not letting Pedroia in the stadium. Like, they're not letting him in the clubhouse. He's like, I'm Dustin Pedroia. I play for the Red Sox. They're like, no, we don't buy it. He's like, no, like, seriously. He's like I'm here. And the guys, like, the security is like, are being really mean. He goes, why don't you go in there and ask Jeff Francis who the F I am, and he'll tell you.
Yeah. No, nails feels like a good description of Pedroia. And I've never been a Red Sox fan, but I read the book. I followed those teams. And again, you're looking at a Red Sox team back then. Poppy was a leader too.
Yeah, Manny was really young, and
Pedroia was. I mean, Manny was never going to be a leader. You know, right. Manny put up stats, but Pedroia and Poppy were. That'd be a good comparison, I think, to what you might be getting out of McLain and De La Cruz. And it's just whenever he's asked a question, Terry Francona. And you're referencing the podcast, Starksville. He's asked a question and he gives you some nugget of, well, I'm going to address that on day one, or we're going to work on that a lot. And it's like, it's as if you put a checklist up of all the complaints of the 2024 Reds under David Bell. And it's like, no, Tito does it differently and he's going to do it the right way. Right. Yeah. And it's terrible in 1-run games. Sometimes that's luck. Sometimes it's not. What can we do? Gets worse as August and September come along. What can we do not to get worse? You know, being aggressive while still being smart.
Yeah. That was the big thing you talked about with Elly that I really liked.
And so all these things, and, you know, the 04 documentary that we chronicled, Chris Garber and I did on one of these episodes. I mean, I'm sure to this day, Nomar Garciaparra probably doesn't like the way that ended in Boston.
Yeah.
But leading up to that, it felt like Terry Francona did everything he could to make it as okay as possible. And then it's just like sometimes you just have to move on.
Yeah.
And I mean, that could happen with like a Candelario this year. I mean, you and I would like to see Candelario ball out, and then if there's a tremendous need, maybe you dangle him at the trade deadline and help yourself while you help somebody else, or he's balling out and he's a huge part of success of the team. But my goodness, I think he knows how to push all the right buttons, and we just keep seeing examples of that, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing you mentioned is the computers. That's something that they're not taking into account is just how big having Terry Francona be here, because I mean, his biggest success for a long time was his ability to manage bullpens, and he's won World Series and been to World Series managing bullpens. You know, I've said it multiple times. If there's no rain delay in Game 7, the Cleveland Indians have a World Series. So it's certainly one of those things where, you know, anything's possible, obviously, but you just have to feel good about where they're at.
Let me ask you this. We're excited, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it. We're very excited. I mean, they couldn't have hired a better manager this offseason.
This is the guy that we were like, wouldn't it be cool if?
I had a Facebook memory from 2013, having just read the book we just talked about, where I said I wanted him before, and now I'm really kicking myself that they didn't hire him, and now here it is. But I guess the few questions I would have, and if we're honest with each other here, nobody's listening out there, it's just you and me. Are you at all worried about his health and the idea that it might catch up to him faster because he's older? I wonder a little bit. We'll see. But he was 11 years with Cleveland, which doesn't seem possible, but he was.
I know. It does seem
and
weird.
So I mean, nobody I don't think would expect 11 years in Cincinnati. I don't think. But I'm worried if it's you'd hope it's 5+ years maybe. I'm worried it might be 3. You know, like I worry. And I hope he takes care of himself. I hope he's learned from some of the things that happened, but they happened in Boston too when he was much younger, where he just wasn't taking care of himself toward the end at Boston. So I guess if there's any reserve of, let's see how this goes. That's one concern I might have.
Yeah, because I think the contract's 3 years, right? If I remember
Yeah.
correctly. So, yeah, you always have that in the back of your head for sure, especially considering he retired because of his health. Well, took a year off because of his health.
Mhm.
But I feel like he's done a good job of putting like his guys in order to where the culture he's setting is there. So if it is something where he's gone like Greg Popovich is not with the Spurs right now because he's going through health stuff, but they're playing good basketball because they're going the Popovich way because of the culture he set. They obviously just got better at the trade deadline, which is a different conversation. But
Sure.
I feel like Francona is just one of those big culture guys. I feel like if you hear like, you and I've talked to Drew Stubbs about it in the past about his ups and downs with his year with Tito, but overall kind of said he was a great players manager. So I feel like the culture's kind of set in stone, regardless of whether it's Francona or not, but he's kind of setting the bar.
I think you're right, and the fact that Brad Mills requested that he could come, that story was brought out as well.
Yeah.
Tito said he wasn't going to ask Brad, and he's had some family tragedy, so he wasn't going to ask him. But they were teammates at Arizona. He's been with them even in Philly. He was on the staff, so he's been with them everywhere he's gone, except for when he went off to be a manager for a little bit on his own. That familiarity for him to be able to kind of have marching orders at any given time and knowing that, somebody knows they're with the program, so to speak. And then just the whole staff. I'm interested to see how the pitching staff and Tito and it all marries together because he hasn't worked with Johnson before. So that one is a little different. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And then old friend Chris Faleka as the hitting coach. So
Yeah.
I think I shared it on an episode of Late Night Reds, the picture I took with Chris Faleka at Reds Fest in 2010. So yeah, and I've liked too what he's kind of talked about as far as, and we've all know this stuff obviously, but he talked about going to see all the different players in the Dominican and the Arizona Fall League and kind of going and just kind of catching up with everybody on the caravan. That was really cool. I feel like it's setting a really good tone.
Did you catch that he said he went and talked with Freddie Benavides as well?
Yeah.
That's pretty important too, to have
For sure.
to establish a relationship and the no hard feelings stuff and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially too, because, the Reds do have a lot of baseball in general does have a lot of Hispanic baseball players. And there's a lot of guys who really like Freddie Benavides in that clubhouse. So I thought that was really, really cool. I think he's doing everything the right way. He's doing the good politician right now. So
he is. And I mentioned before we came on the air, there are some things he repeats quite a bit. And even in his opening press conference, I wasn't bothered by it, but it was like, if there was a chart of things you should say when you're asked a specific question or about a specific thing, it seems like he always says it. Like I think politician is good there, but I do feel like he's very genuine. So
I do too.
Maybe he's political without being fake. I guess.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would say a politician will say what it should be said, even if he doesn't mean it. But this is like I don't think there's much other, like it's either this or it's that with Terry Francona. And you can do the right thing while still having fun and while still having success. Where on the other side is, we're not gonna bend to anything because I'm gonna be in charge. So I think it's key. I think it's a good thing.
I do too. All right, Seth, let's get to why we're here today. Obviously, our good friend Chad Dotson had on his Substack this week talking about this week is the 25th anniversary of the trade that brought Ken Griffey Jr. to Cincinnati. And obviously, if you've been keeping up with Red Lake Roundtable, Seth has talked to a lot of guys from the 99 team. And there's so many what ifs with this deal. And I know that's the thing everyone wants to go to, but I just want to talk about the excitement of that day. So you and I are obviously, we're at different stages in life at that time. So I was in elementary school in the 4th grade.
Oh man.
I lived in Bellevue, Kentucky, and I lived right around the corner from my school was right around the corner from my house. So this is back in the day. I've told the story before, but for those who haven't heard it, if you have, I'm sorry. For me, we didn't have like we do now, obviously in the world of social media where you could keep up with everything, but you heard the rumblings that Griffey might be coming to Cincinnati. You heard that he told Seattle he wanted to move on and so on and so forth. So I remember really well seeing jerseys hung up. I think it might have been Cook's or some sort the news showed, and it said 24 Griffey Jr. on the back.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then I remember the day it happened. I was in my gym class at the time, and my gym teacher says, "Hey, the Reds just traded for Ken Griffey Jr." And me at like 10 years old, I'm like, "Wait, no way! This is insane." So I run home. I turn on SportsCenter, and this is back in the day where SportsCenter had the player, the block in the corner of the screen, and it's Ken Griffey Jr. is the top story, and he's wearing a Cincinnati Reds hat, and I could not believe it. I lost my mind. I was so excited. And it's, literally, like I say this all the time, it's one of my favorite days of my childhood because it's my hero coming to play for my favorite team. And man, it's just something I'll never forget.
So you're right. We were different ages. I was in college at the time. So the 99-2000 school year was my junior year of college. I was at Ohio State, and ESPN News was pretty new back then.
Mhm.
So, you could always dial into ESPN News as well if there wasn't like a special edition of SportsCenter. And remember, it had been rumored like a few days earlier, and I don't know if Bowden did this or what, Jim Bowden, but they kind of walked away for a minute because he wasn't going to include Pokey Reese in the deal, and there was different rumors out there that it's not going to work out. Well, then like 18 hours later, it did work out, and so I remember being in my college apartment. We had it was a 3-story apartment, but just went straight up, and there was 3 bedrooms, and I was in the top floor, and I had a TV in there with my computer and everything. And I remember watching everything I could and seeing it all. And I was dating my now wife. We'd been dating for only a few months at that point, and her sister and her brother-in-law had moved back to Columbus from Florida. And so that evening we were supposed to go to their apartment for dinner out in the suburbs. And I just remember like barely wanting to tear away from the TV. I was so excited. I had all the information. I remember like I was printing out stories and stuff like that because I couldn't read them all, and I wanted to
Yeah.
so her drive. And then we did last year when I first joined the Riverfront. You did the Sports Illustrated remembrance that actually seemed silly now because they kind of technically came back, but I have the Griffey initial cover. I have remember the caricatures of him and McGuire and Sosa. And then Chad even shared this. This is Beckett.
Yeah.
I didn't even collect cards at that point, but I still found a way to get a hold of that soon after he signed. But that's also a time when VHS was still king, right? You had a VCR, and even my college apartment, I had a VCR. I have somewhere in this house an entire 6-hour VHS tape of ESPN News, ESPN, and ESPN Classic showing the Big Red Machine with Griffey Sr., but then showing the 1995 ALDS and showing this, that, and the other. And I filled this tape up of all the news, and it was a big deal, man. It was so big. And Chad said it perfectly. Like, how could this press conference be one of the seminal sporting events of our lives? And if it would have gone better after that day, it would be even bigger. We would look back at this as a huge, huge, huge day. But it just never really worked out after that day. Even remember his 40 home runs and 118 RBI.
Yeah.
But at the time when you still
loses to Sosa in the Derby.
What's that?
Loses to Sammy Sosa in the finals of the Home Run Derby.
But do you remember the whole story there? Jim Rome, of all people, roasted him, and I used that word on purpose because he wasn't going to go to the Derby. It was in Atlanta. He wasn't going to go to the Derby because he had, and Jim Rome made fun of him for this. He had fireplace issues in his Orlando home in the middle of summer. There was something wrong. The excuse was, I got to go home to Orlando and help out. And he wasn't even going to come. And there was such a backlash that he did come to Atlanta. Then he flew right back down to Orlando. It was a whole thing. And I guess that's kind of how it was, because in 2000, people still cared about batting average, and his batting average dipped to like 285, and people thought it was bad. And he hit 40 home runs and 118 RBIs, but they only won 85 games. The previous year they had won 96, obviously, and it was a letdown in a lot of ways. And even that year, that was before the injuries started, and yet remember he took number 30 because 24 was retired.
Yeah.
And there was a story, and it's just like, I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Fan with
I
Robert.
referenced that movie not too long ago on one
You
episode.
did, yeah, I guess you did, yeah. So remember, he wore his old Atlanta jersey underneath
Yeah.
San Francisco jersey, and there was rumors that Griffey stormed into the clubhouse one night and was like, "You tell Tony Perez I'm wearing 24." That was a rumor. Like, it was just the circus kind of came to Cincinnati way beyond what. And it started with spring training. Remember the number of people that were at spring training, and he wasn't that comfortable with the spotlight. And I think being up in Seattle, he could kind of avoid it, except for at those all-star games and the different things. But when he came back to Cincinnati, all bets were off, because he was, every ESPN personality was at the first day of spring training, and he could not escape the video cameras and all that.
Also, a wild time thing to think about that 25 years ago, SportsCenter showed baseball. So that was pretty wild. What a time.
Yeah.
They don't really do that anymore.
But it was really something else. And again, that's before he started getting hurt, and people found a way to blame him for getting hurt, which was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I even had close friends that we were argued about it. Like, I said, it's not as if now, I mean, if you want to argue that he never had to work out or train much because he's so naturally gifted and time started catching up with him, maybe I could see that. But he's running into a wall. He's diving to make a catch and separating his shoulder. He's trying to get home, and he rounds third and just collapses. And these injuries were not like lack of effort injuries. They were actually because he tried so hard when he was on the field.
Yeah.
I want to tell you this. I told the story to a guy I know who's about my age, and we all grew up my age down to your age, right? At the, thinking how great Ken Griffey Jr. was, and he was amazing. And so I got to go the year 2000. I was interning at the Fan, actually 97.1 and 1460 AM here in Columbus. Just signed on as the new Reds affiliate. So that's kind of topical here. Even though for the most part we can get 700 WLW around town here, it'll be good to have a local presence. But I was interning at the Fan, and they sent me to Cleveland to cover a Reds-Indians game. And Griffey ended the game with, he doubled off the wall to tie it, and then Aaron Boone, I think, hit a home run or something like that to win it in the 10th inning or 11th inning. And but this experience I had as a young guy, Griffey was kind of getting after a photographer for literally being like 6 inches inside where he was supposed to be during stretch along the warning track. And I was shocked at the way he was talking to this guy. And then I was laughing to myself because Ken Griffey Sr. and Joe Nuxhall and Hal McCoy, and then me, I introduced myself to Hal McCoy, and Hal pulled me in, and we were all, the four of us were talking. And Senior sees Junior not out taking outfield and starts yelling at him like he's a 6-year-old not doing what he's supposed to do. And to me, it was like he was yelling at this photographer. Then I was like, oh, he's just a kid. His dad's got to tell him what to do. And then he snuck around the screens and came back around to where the Indians dugout was, so he wouldn't have to go shag flies. And he's over there talking to Indians guys, hoping his dad's not seeing him. So it was really funny. And then after the game, he didn't want to talk, even though he factored into the win. And it wasn't until Hal McCoy approached him that he actually agreed to talk, because he respected Hal so much.
Yeah.
And then all of us descended on him. And then, but he told a local Channel 10 here in Columbus, their camera guy and their sports anchor, he says, well, I'm not doing TV, guys. They tried to turn on the camera. And again, it comes across as, man, why is he treating people this way? And it was interesting. I told this story to my son's soccer coach recently, because he had to go tell somebody about a drill he wanted them to run, and then he came back. So I told him that part of the story, and he walked away thinking, wow, Griffey, I didn't know he was like that. And he comes back, and I say, but you know what it was really about? Griffey, as famous as he was, Griffey was shy. And even when we were all interviewing him, I was trying to get sound. You've done it before, right? If you're a reporter, you can muddle through mumbles and things like that. He talked so quiet, it was barely usable when I brought it back to the radio station. He wasn't that comfortable with all that attention
Yeah.
off the field. And when I told my son's coach that, he kind of goes, oh, okay. And so you can kind of understand, even in that little story, the story of Ken Griffey Jr., right? And the reluctant superstar who just wanted to play ball. And I think that's who he was.
Yeah, that's kind of how I always looked at it too. So I thought that was a really good point. And we did get some reactions on our fan mail this week that I wanted to get to that talked about this. Some really, really good ones out there. Because I asked for other memories or anything like that. It has to do with Griffey's tenure with the Reds. And Andrew Williams says, although I would only turn 1 month old the day after he came to Cincinnati, I won't sit it out. Here's a fun fact for you. If Junior had as many at-bats as Pujols, his career home run pace was 734. If he had as many as Hank Aaron, it was 794.7. Now pair that with his defense, just some food for thought. So injuries basically route to being the greatest baseball player to ever live. That's how I'm going to put
it. Well, I don't disagree with you. And at the time he came to Cincinnati, he was bigger than Barry Bonds. He was regarded as probably a better player than
face
Barry
of baseball. Yeah.
And the face of baseball. So like he was Elly De La Cruz, only he had already more than fulfilled the promise, right? Yeah. We love Elly. He's done great so far. I haven't expected more out of Elly so far. That's not what I'm saying. But he was, by the time he came here, 29, 30 years old, he was the Michael Jordan of baseball. And he made it his Super Nintendo game, like there's still articles being written about it.
Oh yeah.
Like they would put the only name that was in there was Ken Griffey Jr. Everybody else was a fake name, but they had the numbers right. And so, and they would use these funny names like Edgar Allan Poe or all these made up names that were famous names, but they would, like, a pitching staff would be all a bunch of philosophers or something like that. And you could go in though and change all the names. I played with the Reds on that so much, but I used to sit in high school even and doodle, like, what if Ken Griffey Jr. and David Justice and all these local guys came back to play. And then, like you said, it never felt real. Even opening day 2000 got rained out in about the 5th inning, I think, against the Brewers. But my grandpa were sitting in right field there, and it didn't feel real even then. He was on the team, and it was funny. He was long before dry fit and things like that. Like, remember he came out wearing that long sleeve, like form fitting. Like, I don't know how much it was wicking moisture. Like, we were still 10 to 15 years away from that technology really taking over, but it was different than the t-shirt that the other guys wore. So even that was different. He was so streamlined looking. And I remember him taking center field in front of my grandfather and I. We're just looking down like, this doesn't feel real. This is still amazing that this has happened. And yet we just didn't see what we hoped to see out of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon Kamick says, I was just shy of 13 when Griffey was traded. At that point, I was at the height of my baseball fandom. My favorite player was traded to my favorite team, like we talked about. I remember listening to the news break on the radio when I got home after school, still chasing that high, and I'm not convinced anything will match that feeling again. No. Years later, soon after I bought my first house, I adopted my most awesome Boxer Beagle mix, and I didn't hesitate naming after my favorite player, Griffey. We lost Griffey this summer, and just like Junior, he was the GOAT.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
That's awesome. And it's, like, I even heard, I was listening to a college football podcast, and they were talking about the Doncic trade because it was so big, right? It and it's like, what's better than a good trade, or what's better than your favorite team signing somebody big? And we don't have enough, we don't have enough of that as Reds fans recently because they just haven't made the moves. But Terry Francona is a perfect example, though. We all got so excited the day of this press conference to hear what he had to say, But I've talked to people who were in that room at Riverfront Stadium when, remember, Carl Lindner sent his Rolls Royce to the airport and got him. And who was it? I was talking to somebody, and he went to cover that event, and he said that he was sick as a dog, and he had like 102-degree fever, but he couldn't miss it because he was. It might have been the guy for the Columbus Dispatch that was covering the Reds. And he said it was like 100 degrees in that room because the room wasn't made for that many people, and but remember that background too, as cheap as the Reds sometimes were, and as shoddy as Riverfront Stadium was by that point in the year 2000, that background is still pretty awesome with all the pictures tinted in red and everything like that. And Jim wrote, the Michael Jordan of baseball has come home to Cincinnati.
Yeah, that the press you talked about VHS earlier. My dad taped the whole press conference,
Yeah.
and when I went to his house, I got to watch the whole thing. So that's a really cool memory. I'm glad you brought that. Yeah, sparked back up. But yeah, man. I mean, nothing like it. I don't know if we'll ever feel anything like it again, even if they do win a World Series. Obviously, that'll be great. But that was just the most unique sports feeling of my lifetime.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if I'll ever get that back again. But did have one more question that I had to get to because this one's kind of funny and it's current. It's from our good friend Rich Thompson. If you're on the fence about attending the MLB Speedway Classic at Bristol, but it was announced that Taylor Swift would be singing the national anthem and Travis Kelce would be throwing out the first pitch, will you go? Or will you stay at home? Um, I would go, but I would not have any issues with getting there right around first pitch.
I think you might have issues with it because as big as this is going to be, if
True.
Taylor Swift's there, you're not going to be able to get anywhere near that place until you got to get there like 4 hours early. I've told the story. I was at the Ricky Karcher game, and that same night they happened to honor the Chiefs for their Super Bowl win, and that was coming
Yeah.
off the one where they beat the Bengals in the AFC title game. And I remember walking into the stadium, and they were handing out these, and there was even muttering in the stadium. The Royals weren't doing very well that year, and like, oh, we got to exploit the Chiefs to be able to, sell out a game and things like that. And the Royals were taking a lot of credit, it felt like, for the Chiefs' success that night. But they had the Super Bowl towel, and the guy tried to hand it to me. I said, I can't accept that. And he's like, what do you mean? It's free. And I said, and he looked at my shirt, and I was wearing a Mr. Red, if we're hot, we're Red's hot t-shirt.
Mhm.
And he goes, the look on this guy's face, probably a 25-year-old guy trying to just make it in the world, whatever. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, okay, I respect it. You don't have to take the towel. All right. And it was just pretty gross, though. Kelsey made a big scene, and Andy Reid, of course, and Mahomes got on the mic. That was pretty gross. And so we could talk about the Kelsey Taylor Swift relationship and my conspiracy theories on that, but regardless, I don't really think that would add anything to my enjoyment of going to Bristol.
Yeah, same. So I will probably still go. The game plan is to go, and we're working out some details. So we'll see how everything lines up. But I'm excited for Bristol. I think it's be cool.
Can I get your take on our final viewer mail question from last week?
Which one was that again?
My friend Ben Lewis sent it in, so it wasn't part of the Patreon, but he said, if Elly De La Cruz has Barry Larkin's career, is it a success?
Ooh. Deeper thoughts and wrapping up a podcast. I would say yes, because 30-30 is still pretty not super common. MVP, World Series championship. Yeah, I would say it is.
So I tried to look at it from the standpoint of even first overall draft picks, but as a whole, first round draft picks, the hit rate is not very high.
Right.
So even with our hopes of what Elly could do, probably because of his athletic talent and maybe a little more charisma, obviously, than Barry had, I think our hopes maybe are higher for him as far as what he could be. But if you put in, there's plenty of guys from the 80s and 90s that we thought for 5 minutes were the best player in baseball or going to be a Hall of Famer, this, that, and the other, and they just didn't become Hall of Famers, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, even I use the example of Sean Casey. Jack McKeon had me convinced Sean Casey was going to win 5 or more batting titles. I still love Sean Casey, but he didn't do that. He didn't win one.
Yeah.
So, I think the answer is it has to be yes.
Yeah.
Because Hall of Fame status is a validation. So at that point, yes. And obviously, we hope it's with the Reds the entire time, and we hope we have at least one World Series. If we get one, we're going to want more than one. I get that. But yeah, I think you answered correctly.
Yeah, I think so too. But hey, with that being said, I think we'll go ahead and wrap out this week's edition of the Riverfront. Once again, just want to do a little housekeeping here. Will not be live on Sunday, obviously, because it's the Super Bowl, so Late Night Reds will be taking the week off. You do want to check out Seth's interview on Red Leg Roundtable this week with the great Greg Vaughn talking about the 99 team, and the story about how he found out he was traded to the Reds is fantastic. So be sure to check that out as well in the same feed if you haven't already.
See, I had that story either backwards or I didn't remember it that way. I thought he went to see her later and talked to her about the facial hair. Like the way he told the story, you have to check it out. It's different than I remember it being, and he would know better than I would, certainly. But hey, if you're going to boycott the Super Bowl on Sunday, throw Red Leg Roundtable up in the Greg Vaughn interview. That go a long way toward entertaining you. It was something else. I've been stoked several times and hanging up the phone with these guys, and he definitely falls in that category. I was really excited after that interview.
Yeah, it was awesome. So be sure to check that out. But that being said, shout out to Adam Dunn. Shouts to Lisa Alberto, Wayne Krenchicki, and Eli Cash. For Seth Shaner, this is Tim Daniel saying so long, Cincinnati.